Welcome back to Secret Weapons, and today we are taking a look at the Rossie filter from GFI system. This might be the weirdest and in either way, either least or most useful envelope filter video you'll ever watch. This is the Rossie filter from GFI, a envelope filter, step filter, or manual filter that has traditionally been used as kind of that classic fast auto wah envelope filter kind of sound that actually has the potential to do a lot more than that. I don't use envelope filters in the traditional sense, to the surprise of absolutely nobody who's ever heard me play guitar before. But I love the GFI guys, and so when this got announced, I knew I needed to get my hands on one because I assumed it would be able to do more than the classic auto wah and, you know, envelope-y, quacky, fast open and close strat thing that I have no use for, but a lot of other people do. And when this came out, we did see a lot of that kind of coverage. And I got my hands on one and just kind of sat on it for a while, wanting to figure out kind of best use cases for it. And for me, it comes in the form of expression control and step filtering. So this is a multi-parameter filter from GFI. And you have multiple modes in here. You have a envelope filter that will follow your playing dynamics. You have an auto filter. You have a manual filter that can be controlled with the expression control. Or you have the step filter, which kind of be tap tempoed in, or you can set your time, but it will just step through up to 8 different stages of filtering. Within all of those modes, you have low pass, high pass, band pass filtering options. You have a mix control. You have control over how severe the cue is, how severe the resonance where your cutoff is happening is, and the ability to save multiple presets within this. And I gotta say, this is a really fun low pass filter. For me, that entails setting the low pass filter, really softening that cue, that resonance, and getting that expression pedal dialed in, especially because you can set your min and max of your expression pedal. So you don't have to like be really careful with how far you push that toe down before you start getting into a really bright thing that kind of pokes through the mix further than you want. There's a lot of customization inside of this. It's really cool. It's a lot more than classic auto filter sounds. There's a lot of really great murky sounds to be found inside of this. We ran the Chase Bliss Mood ahead of this for that intro track for things like lo-fi reverb, delay, reverse, and like auto looping stuff. And then kind of open and close the filter, set step filtering on this thing to kind of add extra life to simple movement within the mood already. And then also used it to kind of create additional movement for the wet effects downstream. So we're gonna jump down to our pedal board samples now and dial up a few key sounds in the different modes. from an ambient perspective. We're not going to try to coax any traditional filter pedal sounds out of this because other people do it well and I will do it terribly, so we're not going to bother. But we are going to showcase how the Rossie filter can actually be a really, really great ambient tool. So before we jump into the Rossie, let's go ahead and talk through our signal chain. I am playing my Bunting Melody Queen with Telly and gold foil pickups into the Walrus Audio Mira compressor, the Browne Amplification Carbon, the Chase Bliss Audio Mood, and the Rossie. From there we go to the Thermae, the Microcosm, the El Cap, the Specular Tempus, and then onward to our amplifiers, which are the Universal Audio's Ruby and Dream in a stereo pair, and then out to our DAW, which is Universal Audio's Luna. The Carbon and the guitar, the El Cap and the Specular Tempus set to a plate sound like this. So we're going to take some different approaches to the different modes in the Rossie. When we're dealing with manual filter here, I find that expression control with the filter is a huge benefit. You could leave it as a static filter, but that is to kind of deprive you of the value of having this expression controlled filter pedal. So what we're going to do is set a loop, like kind of just like a dead tape loop in the microcosm, and then walking through the different forms of filter in the Rossie, build different components of a cool ambient loop, making use of the mood ahead of it and the microcosm after it. We'll start things off with a kind of like low pass filter on the Rossie, and we're going to set that parameter really, really narrow. So like one of the cool things about this is if you've got your frequency at 0 and you're sweeping, typically an expression pedal will sweep all the way to the top and it'll sound like this kind of thing. Which having that much space can be really, really cool, especially if you've got like, same thing, if you press and hold down this parameter one, you can set kind of how high you want that Q to be, how kind of resonant that frequency is. I tend to think that those like super high Qs sound pretty like cheesy and like a 70s synthesizer in a way that I don't love. So what we're going to do, I'm trying to not block this thing. Press and hold, twist down to low, which gives us that nice, gentle, kind of minimizes that Owen Wilson-ness of it all. And then let's go ahead, take that frequency down to 0. So we have this nice dead. And then let's just open that filter up. Oh, sorry. If you press and hold this one for too long, it gives you multiple taper options for your expression pedal, which is really cool, but we're going with the linear option number 1. So let's take this parameter down to 0. Press and hold for 2 seconds to assign the sweep of your expression pedal. And now let's take that toe up to about 34. That sounds good. And now when we go toe down on this expression pedal, like that's fully open. And that's pretty much where I want it to be. So we'll then use pressing and holding on this mix control to kind of walk through the different filters as we build this out. But let's start things off with a fully wet low pass filter. Let's take the mix down on the microcosm. We're not really going to be using it for a bunch of like extra ambience, and instead just create a little bit of a dead tape loop here for a second. Turn on that Specular Tempus afterwards. Give us some El Cap. Okay. So now we've got a high pass filter. Which is great, because like if we turn that off, you'll hear. We can kind of thin that out a little bit. So let's give that a little bit of reverb and kind of add some additional notes that are in that similar range as our chords, but without that low end carved out, so that they can kind of exist alongside one another. Jumping over to bandpass. So this is going to be kind of just a very specific set of frequencies. Let's open up our heel toe parameters again and give it the full breadth, just to kind of give us a little bit of a sense of ton of movement there. It can either be super low or very thin. Give ourselves a little bit of extra reverb on the backside, considering we're doing the big ambient thing here. Being able to blend in those static filter moments of like thinning out the low end of your guitar and blending that in with those kind of big filter sweeps gives you a lot of space to play with the frequency ranges that you have, especially if you're doing DAW-less recording like the Microcosm essentially is right now. There's no flexibility in going in and carving out clashing frequencies in post when everything is one loop like this. And so something like this allowing you to really pinpoint spaces that you want to exist in and areas that you want certain lead guitar or rhythm guitar or complementary parts to kind of fill out or avoid can be really, really cool here. So that's what I like about the manual filter mode. So we're moving over to envelope filter mode now. And what we've done here is captured a manual filter low pass series of chords in the microcosm. Very subtle, very murky. And what you could do over top of that, because you have all this mid-range and treble space to work with now, you could just play your guitar as normal. And it would sound wonderful because you're playing a Mojo Tone gold foil in a bunting, and it will always sound wonderful. But instead, we can add a little bit of extra movement without getting super quacky in an actual envelope filter, as long as you know how to dial it in for your purposes. So what we're going to do here is, instead of doing the low pass filter thing, you know, and to be fair, with the right touch and the right approach, you can totally use that. And it's an absolutely viable way of using this. Super low range, medium to high sensitivity, and just kind of really fine touch as you go into things. But instead, what we want to do here is make the change to making this your high pass and low pass kind of interacting with one another. Set that Q nice and low. Make sure your parameters are, your sensitivity is super high. You want your range pretty high too, honestly. And then just make sure that that mix is maxed out. And now those two filters will actually offer a little bit of extra movement to your guitar tone while still giving you all of your treble information. You can hear there's a little bit of that. It's really subtle, it's really minor, it's not at all quacky, it's not at all rhythmic sounding. Let's jump over to that reverb. Diffuse it out a little bit better. Even turn up that Q a little bit if we want to. You know, versus just a really kind of like beautifully subtle bit of movement added in. You don't have to do major filter sweeping. You don't have to do an overly dramatic amount of movement. It's just little subtle changes, you know? So how I want to wrap this up is kind of keeping in that same process. We're going to jump over to the step mode in here, and you can see that with this series of like levels of the filter being opened or in different positions, and you can hear that as kind of so what I want to do is use that to randomize some textures from a loop in the mood applied on top of the loop we have going in the microcosm right now. So what we're going to do here is let's make sure, where does that noise come in? There we go. So what we're going to do here is play in a little bit of guitar, capture it in the tape loop without the Rossie. And so then you could take that, you could apply it to the microcosm and have it just play back super consistently like that. Go down to maybe one of the sequence modes. Let's give it something a little bit more movement. So those series of steps can actually be, take it to the minimum BPM, and then let's also set it to a random number of steps. Let's turn down the mix just so that we're not getting quite so much resonance. Set a low range as well. But you can see we're randomly reassigning the parameters across this as it walks. And let's use that to just create a little bit of added unknowability to what's happening inside of the microcosm. Change this as well to not be bandpass like it currently is, and instead to be your low pass filter. And the interesting thing about using it as a low pass filter, especially into something like the microcosm, is because the microcosm is, in most of its modes, is looking for a trigger to start sampling something, like an in point and an out point kind of thing. Low levels on that low pass filter will actually do a good job of ducking below the trigger sensitivity of the microcosm, allowing you to kind of intermittently pull samples as opposed to consistently pulling samples. Let's pull back on the filter in the microcosm on this one a little bit. So this is super cool. The glide on here with no filter. You hear that it's very consistent and it's a little predictable, but Rossie's stepping through that filter and chewing it up. Will actually add a lot of additional glitchiness to an already kind of glitchy pedal, which is really great. I mean, we could even take it a step further, bring in the Chase Plus Audio Thermae. I mean, we are just looking at the Rossie from the perspective of additional tools in your ambient noisemaker toolbox. So now we have a little bit of Chase Plus Audio Thermae after the Rossie. So Mood is taking that loop, mangling it in Rossie. Rossie is passing that filter sweeped and filter stepped randomized thing over to Thermae, which is also pitching it slightly. And now we take it all back into that crazy glitch setting, or into like maybe one of the blocks modes. You almost get like a Doppler effect being randomized by the Rossie, which is really cool. So now we're back to just this standard walkthrough thing. Just the ability to have those random steps assignable in here, fascinating. Such a cool texture piece, such a cool like way to add extra unknowing and randomization, because I think a lot of the challenge in like self-generating ambient music like this kind of thing is you end up with things that just feel a little bit too repetitive and like predictable, and you kind of know where the tops and bottoms of your waveforms are and all that stuff, and it just gets a little predictable. And this is just a little tool in being able to run away from that and to introduce some added strangeness into what you're doing. So yeah, this is how I use the Rossie filter for ambient stuff, and I hope this was helpful.